Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Engage Breakfast. Thank you for braving the unseasonably cold temperatures. I may sound a little like I swallowed a frog this morning, but like so many of you, I'm having allergy issues, so bear with me. I'm going to keep my cough drop handy, and I told our wonderful panelists if I start having a bad coughing fit to just take over and talk. They'll be great. I'm Judy Maggio with Austin PBS KLRU, and we are so proud to partner with Leadership Austin on these vital community conversations. And before we get started, we want to tell everyone about social media because, as we all know, that's where a lot of the conversations happen these days. So here's our hashtags to use if you're going to post on social media, especially Twitter. It's hashtag LeadEngage, hashtag LeadershipATX. So it is November, and we just celebrated Veterans Day on Monday. So today's topic is a timely one. It's valuing veterans in our community. And in case you didn't know, several veterans have graduated for the various Leadership Austin programs, and so we're going to call one of them up here. I'm honored to introduce David Paris, who is a Leadership Austin Emerge 2011 alum, and he is going to share just a few words. Please welcome David Perez. And David, I understand that 2011 was the best class ever of Emerge.
Clearly.
Okay, just want to clear that up.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Dave Perez. I served in the Air Force from 2004 to 2010 as a nuclear weapons officer. Thank you all for having me here. Thank you. Although I was in the Air Force, I never saw the inside of a cockpit, so there's that. On behalf of the Leadership Austin alumni, welcome to the Engage Breakfast. Thank you all for being here, for valuing veterans in our community, and spending your time with us today. As we gather this morning, just a quick reminder, as always, that the goals for the breakfast are to inform, to share information about a community issue, to share perspectives, even if they're different from your own, and to act. If we get inspired as we leave the room, share with somebody, or take it even further than that. If you feel called, connect with the folks on the panel, get involved, do what you can. You also see some sponsors on the screen. We'd like to thank St. David's Healthcare, Texas Gas Service, Wells Fargo, and Austin Community Foundation for their ongoing support this season. We'd also like to send our special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Ascension Seton. Help me welcome Geronimo Rodriguez. He's the Chief Advocacy Officer at Ascension Seton. Geronimo?
He's running a little late, so we'll just get started.
Okay.
Maybe we can hear from Geronimo at the end.
Yeah,
okay.
You can all shout Geronimo when he walks in.
The mayor's always running late, so now that Geronimo's president of the school board, maybe he feels like he can run late too. A few things before we get the show on the road, and again, thank you all for being here this morning. I lead news and public affairs at PBS Austin, KLRU, and our monthly program is called Decibel because we amplify issues that we feel like that really matter to this community, and the reason this partnership works so well is that Leadership Austin and Decibel are often covering the very same issues. So I want to tell everybody that at the end of the month, in November, on the 22nd, on Friday the 22nd at 7:30, we will have a half-hour special news broadcast, and the theme is valuing our veterans, and one of our panel members, Glenn Tower, will be prominently featured, and we hope you'll tune in for that. As a friendly reminder, we are live streaming on our Decibel ATX Facebook page. Some of you have cards on your table. You can get the address of the Decibel ATX Facebook page, but we would love it if you would share this conversation with your friends. Not everybody can drop everything and be downtown on a Wednesday morning and be part of a discussion like this. So this is a way we can really elevate these conversations and spread the word to folks in the community about these topics. If you don't want to share right now, this video will be uploaded to YouTube and will live on the Leadership Austin website and also on the Decibel ATX website. So there's so many ways to share this important conversation. And as is for tradition with our Leadership Austin Engage Breakfast, we call it Engage Breakfast. We want all of you in the audience and those of you watching on Facebook to please participate and ask questions. That's why I want to introduce Courtney Bailey. She is sitting in the audience. And Courtney is the program lead. She's right over there for the Engage Breakfast series. She's going to be fielding your audience questions today, both from all of you here at the library and all of you watching at home. And if you want to send in a Facebook question, just put it right there in the comments section. So, joining us now, we want to introduce the people of the hour, our three panelists, and they really have unique perspectives on valuing veterans. I first want to introduce Anna Baker. Anna served in the U.S. Air Force between 1980 and 1984. She is the Veterans Entrepreneur Program Manager for the Texas Veterans Commission. And before taking that role, she was the Texas Veteran Commission's Women's Veterans Program Manager. And we're going to talk about the unique role of women in the military. Next, we have Ian Fallu, and he served in the U.S. Army from 2007 to 2015. He is the city lead at Bunker Labs. Now, this is a national network of veteran entrepreneurs dedicated to helping new veterans start their own businesses. And finally, on the end here, we have Glenn Towery, and Glenn has been such a great resource for us as we've told the stories of veterans over the past few years. He served in the U.S. Navy from 1971 and 1972 in the Vietnam War. He is the founder of the Austin Veterans Arts Festival, which we'll hear a little bit more about, and the Veteran Suicide Prevention Channel. So Glenn is very active in the veterans community. So thank you all for being here. We want to jump right in. I'm going to give you a little bit of framework for today's discussion. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are 18.9 million veterans in the U.S. and between 1.5 and 2 million living right here in Texas. Here are a few more numbers. 181,402 female veterans live in Texas. The unemployment rate for veterans in Texas is 5.6%, which is lower than the national average. The poverty rate among Texas veterans is 6.7%. The median household income among Texas veterans is $63,884. And sadly, approximately 2,200 Texas veterans are homeless. So veterans, you bring a really unique set of skills and experiences to our community and to the workplace, but you also have some unique challenges. So I want to begin by finding out, first of all, what led you to be part of the military, and second, what is just one major obstacle that you had to overcome because of your military service, perhaps when you got home? And Anna, I'm going to start with you.
Good morning. So I grew up in Texas. I was raised in a small town, maybe you know of it, Menard, Texas. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, Texas, yeah. Growing up in a small town, I always dreamed of something more and wanting to see more. I was an avid reader, and I joined the military because I wanted to see the world, and I had that opportunity. I had never been on a plane, so I took my first plane ride to California, and then I went to Korea, Panama, and back to the United States, and then as a civilian, I actually lived in Germany for 4 years and worked for a government contractor. So I really learned a lot, and learned a lot about diversity. I would say that my biggest challenge, and I didn't realize it at first, so in 1984, when you got out of the military, there were no programs to help you transition. So it was basically, thank you for serving, have a good life. So I didn't really have trouble finding a job. I actually did pretty well in that regard. But where I realized I was struggling, and it wasn't until I started working in corporate America, and I worked for a company here in Austin for 16 years, that it was my assertiveness that tended to cause me problems. So what a lot of people don't realize is that in the military, when you have a very straightforward way of having a conversation, you don't learn a lot of soft skills in the military, and that was my biggest challenge, was learning those soft skills so that I could be a better employee. But those are things that you don't get, that nobody teaches you until you find a mentor, which I did. So that was my biggest challenge.
Anna, do you think you would have faced those same challenges had you been a male? Because assertiveness sometimes in men is valued more than it is in women.
Probably not, yeah.
That's interesting. Ian.
Yeah. So I grew up as an Army brat. That just means that my dad or one of my parents was in the military. So I was an Army brat. I was born in Germany. I graduated high school in South Korea. Kind of moved around the world with my dad. At one point we said we wanted to go to college. My dad said, "Hey, why don't you guys go to West Point?" So my brothers and I have two brothers. We all ended up going to West Point. And through that, obviously kind of following and shadowing my dad, understood, what the military was, what service was, what it meant to be selfless in your pursuits and think about community first. So that was a lot of the reason why I chose to go to the military. Upon graduating, I went to Germany and Afghanistan and North Carolina and New York. I left the military in New York, decided I wanted to go and be an entrepreneur. I wanted to go start a business. I would say the biggest transition challenge for me was kind of a struggle for, I would call it power. There's a power dynamic that you're not privy to while in the military and the military community that the civilian community is already gaining. My peers that I graduated high school with that didn't go to the military, they've gone on and they've gotten internships, kind of rub shoulders with people that are in their field. Was able to kind of build a network that I wasn't able to have because I was in the military, and the people that I rub shoulders with are colonels and majors, and what job are they going to be able to get me? So I think that was the biggest struggle, was trying to figure out, how do I get into this network? How do I find myself in here so that I can kind of change the power dynamic and I can start being a member of the power society, I guess, in a way.
I want to be a member of that power society. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, I do think that it's maybe, so I think when after World War II, your veterans that got out, actually 50% of the veterans that got out of the military after World War II started businesses. And I think that was a matter of the society had broken down to a point where it needed to be rebuilt. Right. So they were able to take advantage of that power because it was all getting rebuilt at that time. Nowadays, I think it's 6.6% of military veterans start businesses. And I think that's in part, is maybe getting a little deep, but I think that's in part because of the structure that we have set up now is so much more solid and hard to break into, that it's not as easy to disrupt and just say, I'm going to do something on my own.
We're going to hear more about that in a few minutes. Glenn, I don't remember, were you drafted into the military?
No, I wasn't drafted into
Okay.
the military. I actually, I'm back home here in the state of Texas. I was born at Fort Bliss in El Paso. My father was in service there. And shortly after I was brought onto the planet, my father was shipped to Korea. And so what happened, he had California family, and we went there while he served in Korea. And like you, when he came back, I wound up in Germany for a while. And I really was raised, though, in South Central Los Angeles. It was a world apart from the world that I've experienced here in Austin. I was raised in what you would call the ghetto. And I learned the ways of the streets very, very early there. One of the things that I began to learn was that in order to get ahead in the community that I was in, the military was a great option. From the things that were going on in my community, I was never like one of those guys that wanted to be a gang member or anything like that. You know, I thought those guys were punks, and I didn't like that. So I decided that early that when I got the opportunity, I was going to go into the military. And I looked around and they had these commercials, join the Navy and see the world. And I had only been in South Central. So I said, man, that sounds good. So I said, I'm going to join the Navy and see the world. And I went down to the recruiter's office. And I hadn't graduated from high school, and the guy, I never will forget it, he said to me, he said, you don't have a high school diploma? I said, no. He said, that might be a problem. He said, hold on, let me make a phone call. And he made a phone call, and he said, okay. Hung up and kept on working. I said, well, what'd they say? If the body's warm, ship it. Welcome to the Navy. So that's how I began my military career. That's why I joined the Navy, to get out of the area that I lived in and to try to find success in another way and to see the world. I wanted to really actually go around the world and see it, you know, on a ship with a whole bunch of guys. So the worst experience that I had was actually coming back. I was medevac out of Vietnam, and discovering, I remember the first time that I got out in my uniform, I was in San Francisco, and I was walking down the street, and all of a sudden, some people said, hey, and I looked up, and there were 3 eggs incoming. And I saw them as like frozen in my sight. I can still see those eggs as they found their mark. Plap, plap, plap. And I just stood there. These guys were laughing in the bed of a truck. And I got so furious for what they had did, for what they had done. And, you know, to this day, I say, thank God I couldn't catch that truck. Because even though I was outnumbered, you know, I would have did my best to hurt somebody that day. Because to me, it wasn't only that they had defiled me as a person and defiled my uniform, but everything that I stood for. Yeah. But God was good, and I couldn't catch it.
Well, I want to talk to you, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into some of the mental health challenges that you face, Glenn, and how you've turned that actually into a positive for our community. I want to switch gears, though, for a minute and talk about women, because women veterans in the United States are close to 200,000, actually here in Texas. There is a large and growing population of female veterans, but as you know, Anna, many of them face significant challenges in everything from accessing the right kind of health care and other services, and they often experience a lack of recognition compared to their male counterparts. I know one of the women that we talked to in our roundtable last month said, I have a license plate that says I have a Purple Heart, and people often say, oh, did your husband serve in the military? So talk about the female challenges and why these gaps still exist, Anna. Yeah,
it is unfortunate, but if you think about the fact that women still only make up approximately 10% of the military, so we are a really small population. And that's why I think a lot of times it gets overlooked. But it's also generational. So if you think back to the Vietnam War, and I'll tell you, I learned a lot of this stuff once I went to work for the Texas Veterans Commission with the women's program, because I did not realize how much I did not know about my own veteran identity and actually claiming my veteran identity. But when women got out of the military from Vietnam, most of them having served as nurses or in administrative roles, a lot of them were told that because they didn't serve in combat, that they weren't eligible for benefits. So they were like, okay, you know, so they got married and had families and went about their lives. And I think what's happening now is with Iraq and Afghanistan, and so many more women playing more significant and dangerous roles in the military, they are the ones who are actually helping to elevate the woman veteran experience. and starting to tell their stories. And by telling their stories, they're encouraging the women from the prior eras, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, to start telling their stories. And I think that's so important. But I think a lot of it, I mean, even myself, after serving, I didn't really identify as a veteran. Even though even when I was in Germany, I worked among the military community. I don't know why that was. Maybe because even as a woman, and maybe even some men feel this way who don't actually serve in a combat role, maybe they serve in some kind of supporting role, almost feel like, well, I don't deserve it because I wasn't on the front line. And so one of the things that I tried to do when I was doing outreach and trying to encourage women to own their identity was to remind them that the men on the front line couldn't do what they do without you. And when you joined the military, you signed on the dotted line to serve your country, to go where you were told to go, and to do what you were told to do without question. And that deserves recognition and support. And so you should accept and honor your service and take advantage of your benefits.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I want to switch to Ian and talk more about the whole entrepreneurship among veterans. And from what I understand, the number of veteran business owners, as you mentioned, was actually declining. And is this because of lack of resources and networking, as you mentioned? So Bunker Labs focuses largely on entrepreneurship among new veterans. Why do you think it is important for veterans to develop these business skills as entrepreneurs? And how can we help them do that? How can we help them improve in those issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think military veterans, I mean, I'm trying not to paint with too broad of a brush here, but typically come out with some really great characteristics that would lead them to be able to run a business and start a business and be successful in that business. A lot of it comes down to grit. A lot of it comes down to understanding that obstacles will be in your way, and you just find your way around the obstacle. You don't stop at the obstacle, you make your way around it. So I think there's a lot of kind of characteristics and attributes of a military veteran that primes them to become a business owner. And I encourage that, obviously, through my participation in Bunker Labs and myself kind of going down that entrepreneurial track. I think the way that we all can be helpful to veterans that are starting businesses is, well, one, they aren't in the transition process out of the military. It's not typically a path that's encouraged. For whatever reason. Again, after World War II, 50% of veterans started businesses. That's how we have Walmart and FedEx today. But today, it's more around fix your resume, figure out how to do an interview, and let's see if we can get some people to start interviewing you. You know, that's kind of the solution, the prime solution in today's transition. I believe there's another course. I believe there's an entrepreneurial course that we can go down. But in order to go down that course, and because there's not as much support for that specific path, that's why we need your help. I mean, we need your help to be able to help them network into the places that they need to be. An entrepreneur can't be successful unless they are put in front of people that can actually help them gain a client, gain capital, gain mentorship. If they don't have those people in their direct network, like, where are they going to get it? So I think when we say, let's help out a veteran, one, figure out what they want to do, and a lot of times people don't know what they don't know, and specifically in the veteran space, I didn't know there's anything outside. So the number one job, when I talk to a veteran that's transitioning, I say, hey, what do you want to do? I want to lead people. What does that mean? Well, I want to maybe do operations. Well, what does operations mean? They don't understand there's sales, there's marketing, there's HR, there's all this other stuff that comprise a business and a company to make it run. So they don't even understand that, because you don't know what you don't know. Nobody's actually walked them through that. So I think exposure to what you guys do, like helping a veteran understand, one, what you do, and then two, what they want to do, and then put people in their place that will help them make that path and make that journey. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking necessarily for a handout. They're looking for a handshake, you know? Can you give me a handshake with somebody that will be able to help me pursue my dreams?
Glenn, I want to talk a little bit about the Vietnam War because it was a different conflict. When you came home, I know you were not welcomed home with open arms and shown the appreciation that veterans of more modern day and certainly World War II were given. It's no wonder that so many veterans still today are Vietnam, 40 years later, are showing signs of post-traumatic stress. Can you talk about the long-term impact of how you and your fellow Vietnam veterans were treated? And also, what can we all do to better support our Vietnam veterans? You faced some unique situations when you returned home.
There's one thing that Vietnam veterans do for each other all the time. If you know any Vietnam veterans, you will hear them say, "Welcome home, brother. Welcome home, sister." Because they feel they were never welcomed home. So they do that for themselves. I remember when I came back from Vietnam, I wasn't in good shape mentally or physically. And coming back into the community, it felt as though there was no love for what I and others had done. And I thought that was really crazy because being in the Navy, I saw the bodies being loaded on the ships and the planes of our young fallen. And I knew what the experience was to go into harm's way with a bunch of men. At that time, it was men. And to pair that experience that I had with these other Vietnam veterans with what I experienced coming home was crazy. It was just crazy. Plus the fact, most Vietnam veterans, when they returned, the term PTSD did not exist. The term PTSD was discovered with Vietnam veterans as a course of action because there were so many things going on. I remember my experience when I came back home. I didn't know I had PTSD. I went to the VA hospital because I was dizzy. And the doctors examined me, and we were sitting there, and he got up after a while. He said, "So you're dizzy?" I said, "Yes, I'm really dizzy, and I don't know what's going on." And he said to me, he came back with a little brown paper bag, and he gave it to me, and I looked in the bag. He said, "I want you to breathe into the bag." There was nothing in the bag, you know? And so I said, "Oh, this is weird. All right." So I breathed into the bag for a while, and I started feeling better. And he looked at me, and he said, "Mr. Towery, are you aware that you are hyperventilating yourself?" And I was like, "No." And he started giving me prescriptions of Valium. And that's when I knew, though, that something was not right, that something was wrong. And I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD for many years later. They finally got the diagnosis. So that experience has shaped me as a person. Now, I also experienced racism while I was in Vietnam. When I was in the Navy, one of the things that they didn't tell me when I was looking at all these great commercials about joining the Navy and see the world was that 92% of the deckhands in the Navy were the black sailors. They didn't have billets like, sonar men and, everybody was a gunner's mate, but they didn't have trained positions for most of the African Americans. And when I came on in the Navy, fortunate for me, I became a boot camp leader. And while I was there, I got sent to A school, navigation A school, which I was expected to wash out. I found out later because it's purely math, and I had failing math grades in high school, like D's, But it wasn't that I couldn't do math. I wasn't interested in math. But I did excel some in the A school, and I became a striker. I became a quartermaster, and I was quite proud of that. I was a navigator. I was on the navigation team. But when I hit my ship, which had long-standing history in the Navy, I wasn't really accepted as a black navigator, as a black quartermaster. There were pockets of resistance, I'll put it to you like that. And it made my life hell on two different sides, because on one side, I thought, okay, so the African-American guys on the ship, they're going to be proud that I'm a quartermaster. Some of them were like, who do you think you are, man? You know, just because you got that, don't make you no better than us. And then on the other side, I go up to the deck and I get the business. So it was like, it took me a while to find my place in the Navy, and I was always off balance at that time. So those are the kind of things, besides my ultimate injury that happened to me, that was the kind of baggage when I came out of the Navy that I was carrying. And it was a heavy load.
So I want to make sure that we have some time for audience questions. Courtney, could you pass along some of those for us?
Thank you, Judy. So we have one question about young people. So does the military provide the same role for young people in our country in regards to upward mobility?
So upward mobility in terms of people in the military today, I assume, is what we're saying.
Could you read it one more time, Courtney? That's the way I interpret it, too.
Okay. Yeah, so
Okay.
so the military today doesn't provide much in upward mobility. I don't think in the way that we think of it now, so as a civilian, right? So as a civilian, I think of upward mobility as, you know, I can push really hard, I can network in, and I will get promoted faster than my peers. There's very limited amount of promotion past your peers in the military, and it doesn't happen very quickly. I would say you can go what's called below the zone promotion, which is usually 1 year in front of your peers, but for the most part, you're going to look at your pay scale all the way out to 20 years from now, and you know, I'm going to hit this rank at this age, I'm going to hit this rank at this year, and I'm going to hit this rank at this year. So it doesn't promote that same structure as we see in the civilian side of things. It's more, you know, it's very hierarchical. It's very, you know what you're going to get the moment it's going to happen.
Any other questions coming in from the audience, Courtney?
Yes. Can you talk about the Central Texas Veterans Healthcare System? Are we serving our veterans well enough?
You know, that was a criticism, I know, of the Veterans Administration for many, many years. How are we doing now here in Central Texas? As I understand, Texas does a better job than most states meeting those needs. You want to start with that one, Anna?
Yeah, I'd like to, because specifically with respect to women veterans, the VA healthcare system has come a long way. And I want to take a second also to talk about how the Texas Veterans Commission has partnered with the VA to help them do better, especially here in Central Texas. We have a healthcare advocacy program where we can help veterans who are struggling to get appointments or having trouble with their prescriptions. So we have an advocacy program where we work directly with the VA. A lot of our people actually have offices in the VA facility. And with women, the VA has a VA women's program, and so we partner with them to encourage women to seek out their benefits, And then when kind of going back on the mental health, the Texas Veterans Commission also has their mental health program, and we have peer coordinators all over the state to help veterans who are struggling with PTSD or anxiety, homelessness, whatever the case may be, to get them connected. So, and then Jim Darwin, who's here today, he's with Health and Human Services, and we also partner with them and do a lot on the mental health side to help veterans and that are also struggling with suicide. So I think that we're doing better. I think the VA is doing better. There's always more work to be done.
I think that there's gross under misrepresentation of doctors of color, especially like out at the Austin VA. We've had those discussions with the administration there. In the mental health department, there's only one African-American physician there, psychologist, and he's really impacted because of that. People feel more free, I think, in a way when they can have the option to be able to talk to someone that's of their culture. In terms of the physicians there, I know as of last year, there were none. And I still think that there are none. And so we've addressed that. They've said that they're going to try to see what they can do. But it is, I can tell you from the standpoint of veterans of color that I've spoken with, it bothers a lot of us. We would like to see some black doctors there. And what they are doing exactly to address that problem, I don't know. They told me it's the system. The way that the system is set up is what they've told us, and it's hard to recruit into the VA medical center. So that is my observance right there.
Go ahead.
So I think there's a lot of initiatives that they're doing there that I think are great, and everybody's trying their hardest. I think we talk about social health care or Medicare for all, and those kind of political buzzwords we're hearing a lot. I think you could take an example of military health care that's literally free health care that everybody can have as military members and family members, as well as the VA hospital, which is also free for most veterans. And I think there's some inherent inefficiencies that happen as a result of nobody having to pay for it. Which if I were to just pay thousands of dollars for some kind of treatment, I'd probably get seen tomorrow. However, if it's in this case it's free, and it's I'll give an anecdote of myself. I have a blown knee, a torn meniscus, and I just found that out last month. It took me about 10 months to figure that out through the VA health system. And that's because appointments are so hard to get. I get a phone call and it says, first appointment's 3 months from now. And that's just anecdotal, but I'll say, that's maybe something that we look at when we say, socialized healthcare. It is a good testing platform that we see within the military and the VA.
Does the Veterans Commission try to fill in those gaps? Because it sounds like that you guys get high marks for things like your women's health program, and how are you at the commission trying to address these things that the VA seems to be taking so long on?
Yeah, I think the most important program that we have with respect to the VA is our healthcare advocacy program. Texas is the first state in the country to actually have an advocacy program helping veterans who are struggling to get seen by doctors. Ian, you need to come talk to one of our healthcare advocates. And we actually received an award at the national conference for that program. And again, it's about helping veterans get connected. So, if you know a veteran that needs assistance, then that's one way that TVC, the Texas Veterans Commission, helps.
Okay. So they can contact your group and say, hey, I can't see the VA for months and months and months. Can you help me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's what I was trying to get to. Great. Thank you. I want to move into something that is so troubling to me, and the statistic hasn't changed. It's estimated 22 U.S. veterans commit suicide every single day. 1 in 5 suicides in the United States is a veteran. What are we doing wrong? And are we doing anything right to prevent these tragedies? And I'm going to turn to you, Glenn, because I know this is a passion. I know that you started the Veterans Suicide Prevention Network, so enlighten us, please.
I'll start you off with a statistic. Just in the state of Texas, you compare the population in California and Texas. California has many more people. Texas is much larger, though. But in 2017, they said that there were 491 veterans who killed themselves in the state of California, 496 in the state of Texas. Now, when you check CDC, CDC talks about suicide being the 8th leading cause of death in the United States, period, right? 150 people a day committing suicide. With the 22 figure, that means that veterans are the largest percentile as a group of people who are killing themselves. The big reason is PTS or PTSD. Some people like to call it PTS now, but I personally still feel that it's a disorder. A disorder is something that's caused by injury. And there are 2 kinds of injuries when you're dealing with PTSD. There's moral injury. Moral injury doesn't mean that you ever faced combat. You could have served, just like you were saying, in a non-combative role. But you were the one that typed up the paper that issued the order for that plane to get those bombs that was accidentally dropped on that village and killed all those people. That's moral injury. Just by being a part of something that's happening, it affects you as a human person. And that, believe it or not, for many people, can be very traumatic. So we're dealing with people that have been in actual combat, that have actual PTSD, and then we're dealing with people that are very sensitive people that have moral injury. Moral injury is kind of like the sneakiest one to deal with, because you don't even know that you've taken something to heart like that. It's playing on your psyche. Now, I want to say something about the VA's system of counting suicides. I just checked the VA system website, and they said, 17 veterans a day are killing themselves now. Like, it's a big decrease of 5. But if you check with CDC, CDC says this, that the count for suicide is anywhere from 10 to 50% off. And you know why? Because there are many variables as regards how you count suicide. The people that certify suicide, if they don't find a letter or note saying, I'm killing myself, they won't count that as a suicide. If they don't find a witness that so a person said to them, someone, I'm going to kill myself tomorrow, they may not count that as a suicide. There are people also, these certifiers, they feel sorry for veterans' families because, unfortunately, we have a system here in insurance that does not pay for suicide. So whenever there's somebody if you have insurance to help lay someone away, a veteran or just a person you know, if they are certified as suicide, then the insurance company's like, no, you get nothing here. Even if you've been paying into that policy for 20, 30 years. You're not covered. And so these are human beings. So you have all of these variables. And I want you to go and look at what CDC has to say. They have a website just very plainly talking about how suicide is counted. So for me, for anyone to come up and back down, even the VA, and the VA has been very good to me, I have to admit that, but there's portions of the VA I just don't like. There's things that they do I don't like, and I don't understand why they do it. But, you know, you're trying to, it seems to me, trying to say, well, it was 22, now it's 17. Oh, you've done the work to break that down, when actually the facts are in black and white. No one really knows how many veterans are killing themselves. No one's even counting the family members that kill themselves because of veteran. Well, I come across a case where a veteran killed himself, and 3 months later, the 15-year-old son killed himself the very same way. No one's keeping those statistics. So, what do we do was the question that you asked me. And here's what I believe, and here's what we began to do with the Veteran Suicide Prevention Channel. The Veteran Suicide Prevention Channel is set up where veterans can come and be anonymous. We don't take your name if you want to leave it, or your email address, anything, because you have a lot of veterans that will not admit that they need help. They need help, and if they can get help anonymously, they will. There are a lot of veterans will not go to the VA seeking any assistance whatsoever. And many of them wind up committing suicide. So that's the way the Veteran Suicide Prevention is set up. It gives not only information and provides a channel to give a moral boost to the veterans and the veterans' family members that we support there, but also we have video therapies like mindfulness, where you can come anonymously and take that mindfulness exercise and feel a little better about yourself. Where our whole idea is trying not to wait until you get into a crisis. Matter of fact, when you come to the channel, the first thing you see is a banner creeping along that says, if you're in crisis, basically it says you're in the wrong place, call this number now. It's a place where veterans can come and be uplifted and get some treatment, and hopefully they will say to themselves, oh, that felt pretty good. Maybe I do need to seek some professional help. Out of the Veteran Suicide Prevention Channel came the AVA Fest. And that was because of personal experience of my own that I experienced when I became national gold medalist for the Veterans Creative Arts competition. And there I discovered that art was healing me. And that not only was it healing me, it was healing all those veterans that were there, but the problem was only a few veterans could participate. It's a national thing, but they do it by regions, and only a few veterans could experience that. So I said, all right, let's try to create something where any veteran can come. Right here in the city of Austin, and I'll tell you how awesome the city of Austin is, because every place I went and I asked for support, we got it. From the janitor to the mayor. They wanted to see this happen, and we didn't even know if we could see it happen. And the other awesome thing about Austin is all of the people who worked to create the Austin Veterans Arts Festival, none of them ever got paid a dime. We've been working on this for 2.5 years. One of my guys is back there now. Never asked for any money. Just wanted to be a part of trying to create something to help heal veterans. It's amazing. I feel blessed to have been able to be exposed to that kind of humanity, working with people like that. It's a blessing to know that we still have that in our human DNA, that love that makes us give ourselves. So I don't want to take up too much on it, but I wanted to share that, and I thank all of the people who have worked and supported Ava Fest. And I want to say to you, we have an opportunity here, if we all work together, to create something that will begin to save veterans' lives. I truly believe that.
Thank you so much for what you've done to help veterans, Glenn. I want to turn to Courtney. Do you have another audience question? 'Cause I know we're running out of time.
Are we doing enough to support the spouses of service members who sacrifice things like their career to support vets?
Good question. And do you all have a program at the Texas Veterans Commission that helps spouses?
Yeah, so all of our programs support spouses and family members. We don't
Delineate between.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We all of our programs support family members, and we work really closely with the Texas Workforce Commission as far as trying to help spouses. And the real challenge for them, right, is they because the service families move around so much, they get a job and then they're in that job 2 years and then they have to transfer, and a lot of times it's we were talking about upward mobility. It's really hard to create upward mobility when you're moving around so much. So our Veteran Employment Services, we do have spouses that also work for our agency, helping spouses find employment and other things as well.
Yeah, I mean, first off, my spouse was amazing throughout my entire military career. So she was pregnant with our first baby when I was in Afghanistan, and you know, she just had to deal with a lot all by herself. So I think, you know, spouses are overlooked a lot, and the sacrifice that they're putting in. At Bunker Labs, we explicitly are very vocal about military spouses starting businesses. We think it's a really great channel for you know, this challenge that military spouses have, and that they can't climb a corporate ladder if they're moving every 2 years, but they can start a business, and that business can be digital. It could be some way of combining a network of people, and we see it a lot, and we encourage that a lot. And actually, we run a program every 6 months for 10 entrepreneurs that are 10 entrepreneurs that are either military veterans or military spouses. Last cohort of the 10, we had 3 that were military spouses that were starting businesses, and I love to see it. I think just an acknowledgement that there is a massive sacrifice on the side of spouses. You'll see the military service member probably deploy, or you'll see them leave a lot, and then just leaving a family back behind. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's stuff that we are doing. I think you guys are very adamant about including that verbiage in it, but I think whenever we talk about military veterans, we need to start getting used to using the verbiage of military spouses as well, because that's a population that's being left behind.
We have about 10 minutes left, and we have a lot of territory to cover, but I want to make sure Geronimo has a few minutes to address the crowd. But I also was reminded that we have a lot of veterans in our audience today. So if you are a veteran, if you could stand, and we want to thank all of you for serving our country.
My 2 women.
I did see some females stand,
Yes,
Anna.
yes.
It's time for our call to action. What can all of us do in our individual lives to do our part to lift up veterans in Central Texas? Sometimes I think that we civilians are a little bit ignorant and have some misunderstanding about what it's like to be in the military. What would you like us to know, and what is your call to action today? And Glenn, I'll start with you.
We're dealing with a lot of cognitive dissonance as it regards veteran suicide in America. So the only way to battle that is to make it personal to you. When you hear the statistic, 22 veterans a day are killing themselves, you hear it enough, then you start thinking, oh, it just becomes a number. So we're asking people to meet veterans. Ask them some questions about themselves. What's their name? What are their desires? What are their goals in life? Where do they serve? Write it down and remember it. And every time you hear that 22 veterans a day are killing themselves, remember that veteran and wonder if it was that wonderful person that you met, if he's one of those statistics that day. That way, they are no longer numbers, and that forces you to remember and to care.
Ian, what would you like us to know, and what is your call to action for us today?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I really need to talk about a little bit about that, and so I think it's very important that we set up a culture that we're not stigmatizing a lot of the stuff that we are currently stigmatizing around the veteran community. Just the thought, if I've had people come and talk to me about how do I deal with this veteran that we just hired, or how do I, I'm afraid that he's coming in with all these like crazy thoughts because he went to war, or he has PTSD. What does that mean? How do I deal with that? I think when we think about the culture that we're setting up within our organizations, our businesses, our companies, we have to, those are exactly the reasons why a veteran will bury that deep down inside them. They won't address it because of the culture that we've set up, that they don't want to scare anybody, they don't want to share their experience, because it's detrimental to them. So I think that's part of the solution is that we set up our culture in a way that's not stigmatizing in a negative way, that they're like, but it's rather celebrating an experience that is enriching somebody's capabilities. So that's what I would say. I mean, that's I guess partly my call to action. The other call to action is, if you know a veteran, figure out what they want to do and try to put people in their path that will help them move even further down that path that they're looking to go down. That's what every veteran needs transitioning, is somebody that can help them understand and navigate the landscape that's in front of them that they're just not accustomed to. Nobody really walked them through it, but you could be the person that walks them through it.
Excellent. Anna?
So I want to really briefly kind of share a little story that's actually related to the Vietnam War and women veterans, is that because it's such a small population, we often overlook the women in her lives who may have served and we don't even know that they served. So I met a woman when I started working at the Texas Veterans Commission, and she told me I could share this. And it was one of those women that did not own her veteran identity, coming back from Vietnam. She had been a nurse, and she just kind of, got married, had kids, did that thing. And all these years later, she started to suffer from anxiety. And what I learned, and I just learned this last week, we had lunch, that she had been part of an operation. It was called Operation Baby Lift. And it was right at the end of the Vietnam War, when they were bringing families and children out of Vietnam, and they were flying them from Saigon to Travis Air Force Base. And she was one of the nurses at Travis Air Force Base who was receiving the planes. And they were waiting for a plane, and the plane crashed. And all these years, and I'm sorry, I get a little emotional when I talk about these things, but the plane had crashed. And so for over 40 years, they had been told that everybody on the plane had perished. The children, the nurses, everybody. Well, come to find out, when she started having anxiety, she went to the VA. She took advantage of her benefits. She went to the VA, and she started seeing a therapist. And through just synchronicity, she met a woman who knew the head nurse of the plane that had left Saigon, and not everybody had died. So she actually got to meet her, and she got to meet one of the children that survived. The nurse that was on the plane, her back had been broken. They'd been able to save a few of the children. So that was such a healing thing for her. And that goes to my call to action, is that we need to give veterans a space, a place where they can share their stories. We need to not be afraid to ask them. It's cathartic for them. It helps us understand where they come from, and then it helps us understand how we can help them. That's my call to action.
Beautiful. We have a few business items to take care of before we thank our panel. First of all, Geronimo, I want to invite you up to say just a few words. Geronimo Rodriguez is Ascension Healthcare, our presenting sponsor. Sorry we missed you at the beginning.
Yes.
Austin traffic, it's hard to get any place on time these days.
Traffic.
You're kind of busy leading the school board and all that too, in addition to your job.
There's a little thing called
Yes.
school changes going on.
There's nothing going on at AISD right now.
Yeah, but I'm really here on my role as Chief Advocacy Officer for Ascension, Texas, which includes Ascension Seton and Dell Children's Medical Center and Ascension Providence and Waco. I'm touched by the comments. I'm having a difficult time. I know that our mission at Ascension calls us to recognize every single individual as a human being endowed with dignity, and therefore we are compelled to treat them with respect. And one of our small, tiny efforts to recognize that dignity is a program that was started by one of our Leadership Austin alumni, Kate Henderson, who's our president of our Northern Market. And she created, with a lot of other leaders and veterans in our healthcare system, a program called Red, White, and Blue, where we ask patients who come in who are veterans whether they would like to be recognized as a veteran. We put a magnet on their door, and our staff comes in and knows and thanks them for their service. And if unfortunately that veteran passes away at our hospital, there's a message that comes across. There's a flag that gets draped over, and we have a last goodbye for them. And I just kind of wanted to share that because I think that's one thing that we do that's going to go national to the rest of our Ascension health facilities. But I think for one thing I wanted to do is make sure that Glenn, welcome home. I think that's really important for all of us to welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And for all of you, thank you for your service. I think that's so important for us to do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Geronimo. Even though those gestures, those small things that you may think seem minute are huge. You know, they make such a big difference in everyone's life. A few more announcements. First of all, the alumni here today are invited to come continue the conversation in the alumni corner. We want you to feel like you can engage and converse with your fellow Leadership Austin alums on this topic. I want everyone to know the next Engaged Breakfast will be Wednesday, December 11th, and our topic is going to be Building Bridges Through Faith-Based Religion. I'm so glad my voice didn't completely go out during this panel. I've teared up a couple of times, but this was a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for really shedding light on what it's like to be a member of the military and serve your country and come home, and what we all can do to lift you up in our community. So let's have a round of applause for our wonderful panel today. Thank you all for being here. Go out and make it a great day. Bundle up, stay warm, and we hope to see you in December.